On March 7, 2017, a software patch was released, a routine fix for a piece of web software called Apache Struts. 2 days later, Equifax's own security team sent out the order: install this patch, everywhere, immediately. At that moment, Equifax was holding the most sensitive records of 147 million people: names, birth dates, social security numbers. The patch was never installed. Case file 03, Equifax. And the alarm that should have caught what happened next had been switched off for 10 months by an expired certificate. Equifax is a credit bureau, and here is the strange part: you are not its customer, you are its product. It collects the financial history of hundreds of millions of people, mostly without their direct say, and it sells access to that history, which means Equifax was holding exactly the data a criminal would want most. On March 7th, the team behind Apache Struts disclosed a serious flaw. It had a name: CVE 2017-5638. It let an attacker send commands to a vulnerable server and have them obeyed. A patch was available the same day. On March 8th, the United States government's cyber emergency team warned about it. On March 9th, Equifax's security team passed that warning on, inside the company: apply the patch. But the message went to a list of administrators that was out of date. The person who actually needed to act never received it, and so the patch was not applied. Equifax had a backup for exactly this kind of mistake: a scanner, a tool that checked its systems for software that had not been patched. On March 15th, they ran it. The scan came back clean. It was wrong. The vulnerable server was still sitting there, exposed. For reasons that were never fully explained, the scan simply did not find it. So now 2 defenses had failed: the patch and the scan that was supposed to catch the missing patch. Nobody knew. On March 10th, someone found that exposed server. They got in. For almost 2 months, very little happened. Then, on May 13th, the attackers went to work. They moved from server to server, deeper into Equifax's network. They found databases, and they began pulling the data out. Equifax had a third line of defense: a device that inspected the traffic leaving its network, watching for exactly this: data being carried out the door. But to read its own encrypted traffic, that device needed a digital certificate, a small file that expires and has to be renewed. Equifax's certificate had expired 10 months earlier. For 10 months, the device had been inspecting nothing. The traffic flowed straight past it, encrypted and unread. So the attackers worked in the dark for 76 days, quietly questioning one database after another and shipping the answers out. On July 29th, an administrator finally renewed the certificate. The instant the device could see again, it saw the intruders immediately. By the time it was stopped, the attackers had taken the records of 147 million people: names, addresses, birth dates, driver's license numbers, and around 145 million social security numbers. A social security number does not expire. You cannot reset it like a password. For most of those people, it is exposed for the rest of their lives. Equifax discovered the breach on July 29th. It told the public on September 7th, 6 weeks later. In those 6 weeks, something else happened. The company's chief financial officer and 3 other executives sold almost $1.8 million of Equifax stock. One of them, an executive named Jun Ying, was later convicted of insider trading. He went to prison for 4 months. In October, the former chief executive, Richard Smith, sat down in front of Congress. He was asked how this could happen, and his answer came down to one person. The human error, he said, was that the single individual responsible for passing on the order to patch had failed to do it. One employee, not the out-of-date email list, not the scanner that came back clean, not the certificate that had been dead for 10 months. Smith had already retired. He kept a pension worth more than $18 million. The head of security and the head of technology left as well. In 2019, Equifax settled with the Federal Trade Commission, the Consumer Bureau, and almost every state in the country. up to $700 million. The full cost of the breach climbed past $1.5 billion, and Equifax is still one of the 3 companies that decide whether you can borrow money. Equifax had 3 lines of defense: a patch process, a scanner, and a system watching the exits. On paper, that is a serious security program. In reality, all 3 had quietly stopped working, and no one had checked. That is the lesson. A control you never test is not a control. It is a story you tell yourself, right up until the day someone else checks it for you. This was Case File 3. This was Caught.